Hi everyone, my name is Nico and I lead a team at Unity that works on making voice chats safe. Before that, I co-founded Auto, an AI company recently acquired by Unity, in what is just hopefully one step on a long journey we're all on together towards making the world a better place. I'm happy to be here, of course, and to speak to you today in the context of the Unity for Humanity Summit. In this talk, we'll go through some important concepts around social groups and the problems they have, empathy in humans and our close relatives, and a solution which I think can help humanity build a safe and sustainable future. By the end of this, I hope you will be convinced, like I am, that hope for humanity is not entirely lost. So it's going to be a bit of a story that I take you on, from humans to animals to my own work on cooperation and language, and there's a lot to cover. So let's get started. We humans are social animals. We're not the only ones, right? Many species live and do things in groups, but we are unique in the scale of the impact that we can have on our environment. We are blessed with a gift of advanced reasoning and communication. We see how the world is, and then we can change it by working with other people. And that's how we've come this far, and that's how we've built everything we see around us, right? But as a reminder, individually, we're not very much at all. We're just fragile skin bags of bones and flesh. But it's when we come together that we can do great things. So maybe you've heard this quote from Isaac Newton: "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Well, in this metaphor, the giants are actually a multitude of small people, all of humanity throughout the ages. So individually we are nothing, but collectively we are giants, right? And so that's why everything is about interactions. They dictate how families, companies, societies, and entire civilizations rise and fall. And I'll cut to the chase. It doesn't look like humanity is doing so well right now. I'm going to spare you the images of forest fires and mass migrations and biodiversity loss, but you get the picture. You know exactly what I mean, right? It's as if we had been given a very unique and very precious gift and we were destroying it. So, not destroying humanity's gift is what this talk is about. I have been working on groups for a long time, and there's something you should know about them. First, I will share the uncomfortable truth. Cooperation, by default, is unstable. This makes large social groups inherently dysfunctional over long periods of time. Okay, so let's dig in now. This is an illustration of an animal friendship network from our own research, specifically here in wild mice. Beyond the daily squeaking and fighting for food and territory and whatnot, as you might know, mice have complex, stable social structures which in some way resemble ours. And mice are just one example of animal sociality. 10 years ago, I completed a PhD on the study and the modeling of social networks, the backbone of society. I worked on a range of social species, including mice, bats, meerkats, and humans, of course. And beyond natural social systems, I worked on socio-technological ones like collective robots, decentralized economies, and now online voice chats. So, to summarize, I'm just really interested in how individuals interact to form social systems and what this means for us. And very broadly, the field of study concerned with how things and people function together, or don't sometimes, is called complex systems, right? And understanding complex systems allows us to make predictions around how large systems, like societies, work on a global scale just by looking at the behavior of the individual constituents. That's us, me and you. And of course their interactions. It's kind of a big deal, and that's why three complex systems researchers got the Nobel Prize in Physics last week. So Hopefully that sets the scene. Now for a story, right? Years ago now, I was going through the basics of game theory to model interactions, and I learned a fundamental concept, which is that cooperation again is inherently unstable. That was a big disappointment. But luckily, there's more to it. So I'm going to use a classic example to introduce the notion of cooperation. It's called the prisoner's dilemma. So you have these two executives, right? Let's call them Mr. X and Mr. Y, and they're involved in some shoddy accounting fraud, and they are caught. The police are investigating and asking them to testify individually, right? And each of them has two options. They can either cooperate by not saying anything, or they can defect by blaming the other person. Look at the illustration here, the payoff matrix that summarizes the possible scenarios. If they both cooperate, there's no way to prove the crime. So they're both free and they get to split some of the money which they had hidden away. If they both defect, they both go to jail for 1 year. And if only one of them defects and betrays the other, the one who defects is free and gets to keep a bunch of money, and the other one goes to jail for 5 years. Now, let's take a few moments to visualize that situation. It's a one-off scenario. You are Mr. X. You can choose to cooperate or defect, and you'll never see Mr. Y again, right? You're human, so you're clever. You think, well, sure, I'll be nice. I'll cooperate with him, and he's going to think the same thing, so we're both free. And immediately after, you think, well, but if he thinks that, and he cooperates, then all I have to do is to defect. And then I'll buy this boat and I live a dream life in the Caribbean. And at the end, both will think that and both will defect. The tragedy is that it's the only rational outcome, mutual defection. So I'm sorry if this is a disappointment to you too, but that's how we behave by default. In an interaction between two or more individuals, if there's a way for one to take advantage of the others, they're always going to do it. Defection is the only stable strategy. And it's called a Nash equilibrium because changing strategy will only lead to a worse outcome. And the math behind this is very solid, right? So I learned about this and I was really upset. I was thinking of, Thomas Hobbes, where he wrote, Homo homini lupus, man is a wolf to man. We're just meant to fight and to eat each other. But luckily, the prisoner's dilemma is not the only thing you learn in game theory. It's actually usually one of the first lessons. Because then you start looking at repeated interactions and you add some amount of communication and reputation between the players, and voila. Then cooperation can evolve in restricted settings. It's usually not a strong equilibrium, but it's possible. And so now I'm taking a shortcut for the sake of brevity, but that's kind of how and why we invented, or we actually evolved society, right? We evolve society so that we can avoid being horrible at each other and we can build a future instead. And so real-world interactions are a lot more complicated than the prisoner's dilemma. But the gist of it is that society as a whole, remember it's a complex system, society as a whole is extremely adaptive and self-optimizable, and we've invented ways to make cooperation work through things like governments and social norms and policing. So that's what I've been working on for the past 15 years. Society, interactions, and how to build incentive systems in groups so that we can keep living together. And now, not to be Captain Obvious here, but we currently have a real problem with society. It's not clear that it's working anymore. So we're getting to the limits of what democracy can do. And our civilization as a whole may be on the brink of collapse. I don't like to say this, sounds very dramatic, but someone has to. What we are seeing right now, from our failure to eradicate COVID to political and social polarization, to global warming and biodiversity loss, all of this is the result of this simple truth. We must cooperate to survive and to thrive. And at the planetary scale, we're having a really hard time right now. Now, thankfully, it's not the only thing that I came here to tell you, because here's the kicker. If all of our problems come down to one thing, then maybe there's one solution to all of our problems. And I think I know the solution, and if I'm not wrong about this, it may be really simple. So that solution is called empathy. Remember I told you that we're social animals, right? Well, it's not just something that we decided to be one day. We've evolved sociality over millions of years, and our brains have adapted in response to the pressure for us to be social and to cooperate. And evolution is amazing, right? Before I return to humans, I want to spend a few minutes talking you through a couple of the things that we've learned from our primate cousins to tell you just how deep our social roots are. So first, I'll show you an amazing experiment conducted by Sarah Brosnan and Franz de Waal almost 20 years ago now. So these are two capuchin monkeys. They must give the experimenter a rock to receive a reward. And the reward for the one on the left is cucumber, which if you're a capuchin monkey is okay, and the one on the right gets grapes, which are really good, right? So she just gave a rock to the person, she gets a slice of cucumber, good enough. The other one also gives a rock, but then she gets a grape. Look at how the monkey on the left sees it, immediately gives a rock, and gets again cucumber, and goes like, no way! And she rejects the reward, right? She's really not happy. So now the monkey on the right completes the task again. She gets a grape again. The monkey on the left starts getting really annoyed now, right? Gives a rock. Gets cucumber again. Rejects the cucumber again. And it goes on, right? So we are seeing inequality in practice. And so the paper is called Monkeys Reject Unequal Pay, and it's been cited almost 2,000 times. What this means is that many animals, including humans, have evolved a sense of fairness. Fundamentally, we all have the wiring to reject inequity. Okay, so monkeys turn down a reward if it's less than what others get for the same work. But how far does it go? Do we find evidence that animals reject things that cause suffering in others? That would be very close to what we call empathy, which is the ability to feel the emotions of others and to act accordingly. And the answer to this is yes. I'll just share the main result of one of the earliest and most compelling studies on the topic conducted at Northwestern University in the 60s. Rhesus monkeys had to pull a chain to get food for themselves, though in some cases it would also deliver an electric shock to one of their group members, and they could see it, right? What happened? One of them stopped eating for 12 days after witnessing another monkey receive a shock. These animals were actually starving themselves to not cause suffering in others. That's what they do. In a way, it's not a surprise, right? Cooperation, again, is a central pillar of society, and empathy greatly facilitates cooperation. If I'm able to feel what you feel, I'll have an easier time cooperating with you. You'll be better off, and I'll be better off. And society works. It's very simple, really. So my main point is that this is a trait that has very deep and very old evolutionary origins. It is what we are. I'll use one last primate example to anchor this in neuroscience. I didn't train as a neuroscientist, but I'm quite interested in how the brain works. And I find this picture incredibly beautiful. You have a fully grown human sticking their tongue out in front of a newborn macaque, just a few days old. And the macaque does the same in response. It's called neonatal imitation. And it's not only a cute and heartwarming scene, right? The macaque doesn't have to consciously process the meaning of a gesture to replicate it. In fact, it's too young to do that. but its brain uses something called mirror neurons, which fire in the same way when we do something as when we see it done by others. So my brain, just like yours, and these baby macaques, has a bunch of these. We don't fully understand how they work yet, but it's something along the lines of we perceive others, we feel others, we act with others, all in one go, all as one. So at the lowest level, we are empathetic machines. And I find this mind-boggling, and it changed the way I think about society and perhaps about what we call oneness. So to summarize all this before I return to humans, right? We have the brain structure and the neuronal pathways to relate, to empathize, to care. When we care about one another, we tend to act individually and thus collectively, remember it's a complex system, collectively towards the greater good for our group, right? So it's simple. It just comes down to how large this group is. We're 8 billion people on this planet. How many can I possibly care about? Well, like you, probably, I care very deeply about a handful of people in my life. This circle of concern extends to the people I have stable relationships with, which is limited by the size of my neocortex relative to my brain. And that's about 150 people. 150. That number is approximate, of course, but the most important thing is that it's a hard limit. Just like I am hardwired to be social, I'm also limited in the reach of my sociality. We all are. And so that's why I care about a few people here and now, close to me spatially and socially in the present. But the further someone is across the world and across a social network, the harder it is to develop empathy for them, right? Of course, this works across time. Think, for example, of your direct neighbors, great-great-grandchildren. Do you even imagine that they may one day exist and which world you want to live to them? Most of us don't. Not really. We cannot. It doesn't make us bad people. It just makes us people. And so I call this the failure of cooperation at large socio-spatial temporal scales. And this is a very broad extension of the prisoner's dilemma. And the math behind this is also very solid. So to summarize what we have so far, because we cannot change the way our brain is structured, we are hardwired to not cooperate beyond a certain horizon, and thus we are bound to fail on a planetary scale. And we can very much fail. We used to worry about nuclear bombs, right? Now we have viruses and forest fires and civil wars on top. We have all the tools that we need to fail big time as a civilization. All this because we can't change how our brain works. But can we? Well, here's the thing. I think there's a way. And it involves language and the mental representations that language creates and manipulates in our brain. So this is a little complicated, so I'll back up for a second and I'll give you a concrete example. Since 2017, I've been working mainly on language and interactions, and in particular speech, which is the main channel we use to express ideas and opinions. And because voice is our primary form of communication, our voices define us in our interactions. And language is amazingly powerful, right? It's our ultimate weapon. I can use it to get into your head and change what you think and how you feel. And in fact, that's what I'm trying to do right now. I'm expressing ideas with my voice, and I'm trying to bring up feelings of unity and optimism in your minds. So, if we use it well, voice is the ultimate vessel of empathy. If we use it well, yet often we don't. We use language to do wonderful things and also very nasty things. Which brings me to toxicity in games. We all like games, right? There were 3 billion people around the world who played online last year, but 68% of them report being a victim of toxicity while playing online games. Primary targets are vulnerable players, including children and women, and that's just not okay. So in 2017, I co-founded Otto, an AI company building technology to understand how people feel from their voice. And we are pretty unique in that we focus on the information contained in the intonation rather than the words. So the technology works across languages. And we're using the tech to find markers of toxicity across millions of conversations and letting human moderators take action to enable safe communities. So let's see it in action in this short demo. This is a real Fortnite gaming session captured on video, and we overlaid Otto's acoustic predictions on top.
How do you pronounce your name? So the whole word is silent?
I actually hate
you.
I've never seen so many silent letters in a name before, dude.
What's your name, bro? Oh yeah, it's DAWK, but the DAWK is silent. So it's just
I hate you. Get away. Shut up.
So what these 3 gamers say doesn't really matter. It's actually quite hard to understand, right? But we focus on the tone and the non-verbal cues. And all we need to know here is that there are 2 adults picking on a child, judging from their voice, and they are laughing, and the child gets angry and distressed. Toxicity online is the status quo, and we want to change it. So 2 months ago, Otto was acquired by Unity to scale active positive moderation to billions of online gamers. As you may know, Unity's mission is to allow creators to build rich, shared, interactive experiences to pave the way towards a metaverse. And in my opinion, that's only going to happen if the digital world is at least as safe as the physical one. Well, I want to make it much safer for everyone. I want AI to help us build social norms for online interactions to create a safe global digital society. So to put this back in the context of our larger conversation, we can use AI and broadly technology really as an amplifier to enable empathy at scale. And making online voice chats safe is one step on the way to carrying out the master plan, which aims again at saving humanity. Now for the hard part, right? How do we jump from language to feelings? How do we go from positive interactions in games to universal empathy? How do we scale from safe online communities to oneness? Well, that's a big question, of course, but in my view, it's mostly a capacity and an interface problem. So it's nothing that technology can solve. And well, I can't tell you all the details now because it would take a long time and I would need to go very deep in the brain again. And also there are parts that I still need to figure out, but I think it's possible. Actually, I know it's possible. And my point is this. With empathy amplified by technology, we can extend the notion of family to all of humanity and perhaps all living beings too. And if we do that, we can enable cooperation at large socio-spatial temporal scales, we can beat evolution at its own game and make sure humanity has a future. I know it sounds a little crazy maybe, but to me, the simple thought that this is possible makes it worth trying. And now a more personal thing, right? In exactly 2 weeks, my baby daughter should come into this world. I believe that the world in which she will grow up can be good, but we have some work to do. We must build a better future, and we must make sure our children believe in it too. And that's not easy. We will need a combination of futurism and optimism. And in my view, only universal empathy can enable that. Bertrand Russell was a very wise man, and he worked on some of the most important problems in logic and philosophy in the 20th century. He was also a pacifist, and he got the Nobel Prize in Literature for his humanitarian ideas. And once, he said this simple thing: it's coexistence or no existence. And so that's my conclusion. It is time for us to learn how to coexist and to cooperate with one another and with all living things. So let's come together with empathy to build a safe and sustainable future. I believe in us. Thank you.